But I'm going to start with the one that's the newsiest, and that's what's happening with the Alex Murdaugh attempt to get a new trial this week. Well, I mean, in general, but the proceedings have been underway this week to see what will be the standards at this 3-day hearing at the end of January. There's a new judge in town. The guy who oversaw the case has kicked it to this now retired, but still she comes in for the occasional big legal battle. Judge Toll, I'm told she's 80 years old, and she's supposedly a total badass. Like she runs a very strict courtroom. Lawyers are afraid of her. She's apparently still very sharp, and she's the one who's going to decide whether he gets a new trial. And as far as I can tell, you tell me, Mark, it looks like things could not have gone worse for Alex Murdaugh than they did this week at this hearing, at which the judge is deciding things like what will be the standard for determining whether he gets a new trial, and what kind of evidence will I let in when we have this 3-day hearing that's going to include several jurors, that's going to include court clerk Becky Hill, who's been accused of jury tampering. That's why this whole thing is happening, and who has been accused of being an all-around serial criminal. And not a trustworthy person who should have been within 12 feet of the jurors, all of which the defense is alleging. So am I right? It was a very bad week for the defendant and his quest for a new trial.
Well, yes, it was a bad week based on what they had hoped for. They had hoped for a kind of a full-blown hearing where you were going to be able to get in and cross-examine it to your heart's content. They're now very limited. It will be at least partially public in the sense that her honor has ruled that you won't be able to seek the identity of the jurors, but and it will not be done in chambers, apparently. But other than that, the kind of strict ground rules of this have already hamstrung the defense. I would imagine that they're not pleased. I have not talked to Jim or Dick about it, but I'm going to channel that they probably are a little bit crestfallen that after all of this, that they're at a point where it's somewhat anticlimactic.
It's the most devastating ruling, Jonna, is on the legal standard that's going to be applied in determining whether Murdaugh gets a new trial. There was a question about whether she would rule, you've got to prove not only that this Becky Hill interfered with the jury, that she tampered with the jury, as one juror alleges she came to them and said, watch his body language, something like don't trust him. That would definitely be jury tampering. And the defense wants to argue that's the legal standard, just tampering. That's enough for a new trial. The prosecution wanted to argue that's not the legal standard. It's tampering plus it affected the verdict. It affected the verdict. And she seems to have held tampering is enough. Tampering's not enough. You have to prove that the verdict was affected. And that's very bad for the defense. I don't know that this juror is going to testify that it affected the verdict as opposed to, she said some inappropriate things to me.
Well, and part of the problem is that you're on very kind of treacherous ground, because normally you can't talk about juror deliberation and what went into their thought processes. Virtually every jurisdiction, federal and state, has a prohibition of that. That's kind of a no man's land in terms of going to. So here, while you want to talk about obviously the tampering and what was said, you're almost kind of walled off from getting into how that affected the deliberations themselves. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
That's what she said. The judge said that. So, Jonna, I want to get your take on this legal standard ruling, because it doesn't sound like it went the way the defense wanted. But that's another thing the judge said. She said, we will not be asking, we will ask the jurors about whether it affected your final decision. But it doesn't seem like she's going to make that the determining factor on whether he gets a new trial. But she does want to know whether it did affect the conclusion. But she said, we will not about how they reached their decision. Nobody gets to ask jurors about that. But your thoughts on how this is going for him?
It's so completely unfair. I mean, yesterday I figured they were already dead in the water because I was listening to it on Sirius, actually, and she could not have been more, for lack of a better term, anti-Murdaugh than she was in each and every one of her rulings. Why wouldn't it be enough Megyn, to simply prove that there was tampering. That should be, the end of the story, because if there were tampering, you can't apply a harmless error rule, so to speak, to something like that, especially when the jury tampering comes from inside the courtroom. I mean, my philosophy would be let it all in. Let it all in, and then whichever way the judge wants to rule, she's going to rule. But why limit what is going to be admitted into evidence on something as serious as this, instead of giving them, a wide breadth, and then the judge can decide what is relevant or not for this purpose? I think, look, nobody loves Alex Murdaugh, but this really seems to be an unfair ruling.
So we're talking about a man's freedom here. So like the standard should be pretty exacting, but it shouldn't be impossible. And I mean, in this case, I've never seen such good evidence of jury tampering as they have here. An actual juror has come forward to say, I'm telling you, this happened to me. And you look at the clerk who says, Your Honor, it's all lies. But the clerk does not appear to be a truthful person, Mark. And the judge is also going to limit all the bad facts about what Becky Hill has been doing over the past month, according to what I read. And the evidence against Becky Hill is terrible. We've talked about it on the show before. Well, she allegedly plagiarized the book. She allegedly worked with her son, who was a courthouse employee, to spy on the people who were investigating her and whether she'd done bad things. She allegedly sold access to the courthouse. She allegedly let somebody in with closed circuit TV video of Alex Murdaugh before he heard the verdict, who wasn't supposed to see it. I could keep going. This judge has basically said, you're not getting any of it in.
And by the way, the one that just infuriates me, because I've been there before, is they disqualified one of the jurors based on something which now turns out something she had told the judge. Apparently, they make a credible argument that had just been ginned up as well. I mean, talk about
you're talking about the egg lady.
I don't know how you
egg lady.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's important. So during the trial, there was a juror who got booted on the day they began the deliberations, right? They began the deliberations, I think it was, or it might have been verdict day. Either way, she had made it the whole time, and she got booted because Becky Hill, this problematic court clerk, had apparently told the judge, that juror who brought in the eggs, she's up to no good. She may have been talking about the case outside of the courthouse. And one thing led to another, Jonna, and the juror did indeed get booted originally because of what Becky Hill said.
Yeah, exactly. And there was some, Becky Hill also, either she made up or fabricated some sort of Facebook post that implicated this juror and who was talking out of school, so to speak, and that's why the juror got booted off. But she didn't leave without her eggs, so good for her. But apparently, the defense camp wanted to bring her in also on this motion. And I believe the judge said, no, egg lady can't come in, which again, why the hell not? I mean,
why
she
not?
Was there. She was a victim of Becky Hill, so to speak. Why wouldn't you want to hear from her?
Because the allegation was that this was a pro-defense juror and that Becky Hill could tell. And the court clerk spends a lot of time with the jurors, so it's possible Becky Hill knew what she was talking about. So this was a pro-defense, pro-Alex Murdaugh juror, and suddenly she gets booted because Becky Hill, who again is accused of telling the jury, don't believe him when you watch him, and was writing a book about the case and had a financial interest, reportedly said to somebody, my book will do better if they come up with a guilty verdict. That Becky Hill saw this juror and went to the judge and said, oh, I think she was talking about the case outside of the courthouse. I saw a Facebook post or something like that. And she's accused of falsifying the Facebook post, Becky Hill. So, I mean, why wouldn't, Mark, a judge allow, I realize I don't want to turn it into a circus, but if Becky Hill is a serial liar, why would that not be relevant, given that the whole juror thing is a he said, she said at this point?
Well, there's a couple of kind of things, I suppose, that you can attribute this to. Number one, and this goes to what you had just said, it's not like he's going free if they find out that in fact the jury was tampered with. He's got a federal sentence there that he's going to serve that's basically for the rest of his natural life. Against that backdrop, you would think that would give them some cushion to do the right thing.
Let me tell you a story about a guy named Leo Grillo. Leo was on a road trip and came across a Doberman This dog was severely underweight and clearly in trouble, and Leo rescued him and named him Delta. Sadly, as you know, Delta is just one of so many animals that needed and continue to need help. And that inspired Leo to start Delta Rescue, the largest no-kill, that's important to listen for, care for life animal sanctuary in the world. They have rescued thousands of dogs, cats, and horses from the wilderness, and they provide their animals with shelter, love, safety, and a home. It's dedication and everlasting love to animals. That's Leo's mission and his legacy. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions to stay open, and if you would like caring for these animals to be part of your legacy, speak with your estate planner because there are tax-saving estate planning benefits to you as well. You can grow your estate while letting your love for animals live well into the future. Check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more and speak with your advisor. We call dog a man's best friend for a reason. You can help those who need it most. Visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. That's deltarescue.org. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.